Hey, welcome back. Today I have a special video. I've been meaning to put this out for a while now. We're going to be talking about Beastmoon form balance changes. Right now, the developers are putting a lot of focus into creating new forms, which is great. However, a key principle of good game design is making sure existing forms are balanced, and we really haven't seen too many balance changes yet. First, I think it's very important for everyone to be open-minded with these changes. I've seen a lot of backlash from the community when it comes to potential balance changes, just because people grow attached to the forms they tier to 5, and I totally get that. You see a lot of people saying, "Don't touch my form, leave it alone." But that's not really good from a game design perspective. The more balance changes there are, the more enjoyable and fair the game becomes for everyone. Right now, there's clearly certain forms that are overused, and there's clearly certain forms that are underused. It's important to take the overused forms and give them tiny nerfs, as well as take the underused forms and give them tiny buffs. There's a very clear meta in Beastmoon these days, and I know most of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Whenever you see a roster of 6, you almost always see it contain these 5 forms. And you almost never see these 3 forms. So let's start from the top. Stormwolf is the most overused and the most broken form in the Beastmoon meta currently. I'm willing to put money on the fact that I've seen Stormwolf played against me on 99% of opposing teams. And there's many reasons for this. For one, it has a whopping 525 health. It has a devastating stun chain combo with its Storm Owl spell. It has a 200 blade for 2 pips, a 200 shark hit for 2 pips, and a 300 phoenix hit for 3 pips. That's 100 per pip on a large form. That's a lot. It also gets a really nice AoE at tier 5. For these reasons, Stormwolf is almost always used on every single team, and that's why it needs a pretty hefty nerf. I'm suggesting 2 changes. 1. The damage of its Storm Shark should be reduced from 200 to 150, putting its damage per pip from 100 to 75. That's because as a Storm form, its main value should come in the form of blades and not actual hits. I'm totally fine with it keeping its 200 blade, so it could still dish out 200 value on round 1, but by reducing Shark from 200 to 150, that'll definitely help balance it. I still think it would be overpowered even with this nerf, so it needs another one. I'm suggesting that the Storm Wolf stun gets swapped with the Storm Rat stun. Because right now, its Storm Owl stun chain is absolutely devastating. For 1 pip, you can continue to chain stuns while doing 50 every single round. Compare this with the Storm Rat stun, where you're barely ever pulling off the condition, so you're basically just stunning without doing extra value for 1 pip every single round. It's still good, but not broken. This would also buff the Storm Rat, which is barely used, but more on buffs later. The next form that should get nerfed is Death Pig. Death Pig has always been a staple of almost every team I play against, and for many reasons. One reason is it has a ton of utility. It could weaken, it could trap, and many of its spells have a lot of value per pip. But I don't think Death Pig should get a damage nerf like Stormwolf. In fact, I think the reason why it's so overpowered is because it has 2 bonus pips for a medium form that has high damage. This means you could start every fight with 3 pips being able to chain 2 2-pip Seraph spells. 200 spam at the start of a match should never be a thing in Beastmoon, especially for a medium form. Reducing the bonus pip limit on Death Pig would make it way more comparable to many other medium-sized forms, while still remaining a good asset on the team. So Death Pig should have 1 bonus pip, just like Fire Pig and Myth Pig, not 2. Fire Colossus has always been overused ever since its release. And there's a reason for this. For one, it has really high health, of course being a large form it stands at 525 HP. It also can pip itself for 0 pips, which is pretty remarkable. It also has 2 great choices to build pips. For 0 pips it can pip itself, or it can mantle. The main problem again is that large forms should never have the option to deal 200 damage for 2 pips. By reducing the damage of its beetle from 200 to 150, that would keep the Fire Colossus closer to its school identity, focusing more on damage over time rather than direct hits. This would definitely help balance the form, and it would give other Colossuses the time to shine. Next up is Balance Krok, again, a solid staple to any team, and most teams I go up against have one. The reason why Balanced Krok is way above the curve right now is because it could pip itself, it has high damage per pip, and it could swap traps and shields. Take a look at Tip the Scales for instance. That's a whopping 175 value for 1 pip. But that doesn't need a nerf. In fact, I think that gives it good school identity being a balanced form, with the trap and the shield together at once. It's the Deadly Sting that's too broken at the moment. For 2 pips, it could deal 200 damage, and it could pip itself if the enemy is warded. This condition is extremely easy to pull off considering you could trap the opponent at any time with 1 pip. So a ton of these Deadly Stings end up being 200 damage per pip, which is pretty insane. I suggest we reduce the cost from 200 to 150. Even with this minor nerf, the Balanced Krok would still prevail as a really good form. The last form I want to touch upon that needs a nerf is the Myth Minotaur. Myth Minotaur was always a very balanced form. That is until a recent balance change which brought up the health of all myth forms. Now standing at 475 health, this medium-sized form packs a big punch. Plus, if you set up your minion early, you could pull off all sorts of crazy defensive conditions. I'm suggesting 2 minor changes to the Myth Minotaur. The first change being reduce Bloodbat from 100 damage to 75 damage. It'll still keep its shield steal condition, however it won't be able to dish out 100 damage per pip every single round. And this is good especially because the Myth Minotaur was designed purposefully to be more defensive of a form rather than offensive. The second nerf I'm proposing is for its AoE shield to be brought down from 200 to 150. 200 AoE shields for 3 pips is some incredible value, even for ice forms. Plus I've seen a ton of Myth Minotaur battles stall out completely, so this would help prevent that. And keep the Gobbler how it is. I don't think it should get rid of its 200 damage hit. By nerfing these 5 strong forms that are currently dominating Beastmoon's meta, we'll be seeing a lot more variety in the forms that players choose, which would overall help the game a lot. But again, it's not just the overused forms that should get nerfs, but also there's a few forms that rarely ever get used. I'd go as far as to say that these forms get used 1% of the time, if not less, on my opposing teams. Let's begin with the Ice Wolf. Even having a bonus pip limit of 1, it doesn't hold up at all against its large ice counterpart, the Ice Colossus. Sure, it has a couple good shields. However, its damage per pip is pretty atrocious. Most of its spells deal out 50 damage per pip, which is honestly not that bad for a large ice form. But its overall damage output is just so low, which is why rarely anyone ever plays it. I hardly ever see Ice Wolf win a match, and if it's ever stuck against an opponent one-on-one, forget about it. That match is just a lost cause. It's either going to lose or put itself in a stalemate. I'm proposing that we see a plus 25 damage buff to its Brisk Blast and its Shatter Squall. These 2 minor buffs would have it see the light of day a little bit more often. Next up is the Life Minotaur. The Life Minotaur does not hold up at all against its medium life counterpart, the Life Drake. Life Minotaur's damage output's pretty weak, but as a life form it really doesn't need to hit hard. The problem lies in the heals. As we all know, heal overtime is pretty useless in a fast-paced game like Beastmoon, where it wouldn't revive a player that died. So let's take a look at its burst heals. It has 2 options if you don't include Bull Rush. One option heals at 75 health per pip, and the other option heals at 50 health per pip. I feel that if Radiant Boon was buffed from 150 health to 200 health, it would make it a much better life form to choose, and it would help when it comes to reviving teammates. And that's really all it needs, just a 2-pip 200 heal. If so, it'll be played at least a little bit more. The last form I want to talk about today is the Life Fairy. I'm proposing that we buff its Dryad of Artemis that it gets a tier 5 from 75 health per pip to 100 health per pip. As a small life form that's almost always targeted first and dies immediately, it should not be healing as low as 75 health per pip. And take a look at the other X-Pip spells that exist. Ice Colossus's X-Pip Shield is 125 value per pip, and the Stormcroc's Triton is 100 damage per pip. So why is Life Fairy's heal currently 75 value per pip? Buffing its tier 5 heal would easily make the form more playable, so hopefully we'd see more Life Fairies running around. And that wraps up my potential Beastmoon balance change ideas. Seeing all these changes made would greatly benefit Beastmoon as a whole, and it would allow for a wider variety of forms to be selected. so we don't keep seeing the same forms dominating the meta over and over and over again. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like. If you agree or disagree with anything I said, comment down below. And it would mean a lot if you shared this video with your friends to help spread the word. It really helps my channel grow. Thank you all so much, and catch you in the next video.